Hej! I programmet förekommer en mycket känd australiensisk sång som heter Waltzing Matilda. Vem eller vad är Matilda i sången? Rätt svar. Matilda, det är ett slags knyte och det innehåller de förnödenheter, alltså den utrustning man behöver när man lever vildmarksliv. Eftersom programmet som vi nu ska sända är helt på engelska så ska jag förklara några ord och uttryck som förekommer i programmet. Det här är floden Yarra, the Yarra River, med Melbournes skyskrapor i bakgrunden. Så här säger en av personerna i programmet när jag ber henne beskriva Melbourne. Det är en lugn stad. Vi har inga riots, upplopp. The citizens are well behaved. Invånarna är väluppfostrade. Längs floden Yarras stränder finns det flera offentliga grillplatser. Vid den här grillplatsen firas a birthday party, en födelsedagsfest för en kvinna från the capital city of Indonesia, huvudstaden i Indonesien, som är Jakarta. De gröngula spårvagnarna, the trams, det är de traditionella här i Melbourne. För att göra stadsmiljön lite gladare har man nu målat många vagnar i glada färger och mönster. De vagnarna får ni se i programmet. Det finns 27 nationaliteter på den skola vi besöker. 80% av eleverna är födda overseas, på andra sidan havet som det heter här i Australien. Vi säger utomlands. I skolorna som ligger i the outer suburbs, yttre förorter, eller i de yttre förorterna, finns det inte många invandrarbarn. Jag använde uttrycket outer suburbs och översatte det med yttre förorter. Storstäderna i Australien har en kärna som kallas the city. Och områdena närmast stadskärnan är indelade i inner suburbs, inre förorter, och runt om ligger sedan outer suburbs, yttre förorter. Det här är en bild från en inre förort som heter Carlton. Vi ser här Victorian houses, viktorianska hus, utsmyckade med ironwork, järnsmide. Efter Aten och Thessaloniki är Melbourne den stad som har det största antalet Greek-speaking, grekisktalande invånare i världen. Numera använder man ofta uttrycket multicultural society, samhälle med många kulturer, när man talar om Australien. Här i Melbourne bor 30 000 kineser och de kommer från different regions, olika områden i Asien. Det här är en av Australiens största sporting events, sporthändelser. Det är finalmatchen, the grand final, i Australian Rules Football, australiensisk fotboll, eller ordagrant översatt fotboll med australiensiska regler. De flesta australiensare, cirka 90%, bor i städer. Den enda kontakt många av dem har med landsbygden är när landsbygden kommer till stan, som här i den årliga Royal Agricultural Show, den stora jordbruksmässan i Melbourne. Uttrycket a dinkum Aussie som förekommer i programmet betyder en äkta australiensare. Med den här bilden från The Royal Agricultural Show går vi över till programmet. How would you describe Melbourne?
It's a good city to live in. It's very traditional, fairly quiet. It's a friendly place.
What do you mean by quiet?
There's not much crime or riots or anything like that. It's fairly, all the citizens are well behaved.
What happens here by the river?
Usually people come down here to have a row in the boats along the river, or have a barbecue, or they can hire bikes and ride around the bike tracks beside the river.
Di TV judulnya sate gitu. Sate kek. Sate ada. Selamat ulang tahun Bu Ane. Ya, bapaknya belum makan kalau belum makan. Panjang umurnya serta mulia, serta mulia, serta mulia.
Is this your birthday party?
Yes, that's right.
How long have you been in Australia?
I have been for 10 months. I arrived here March until December.
And where do you come from?
I come from Indonesia, from Jakarta, capital city of Indonesia.
And what are you doing in Australia?
We are student. I am student. In Indonesia, I am a teacher. I work in a teacher training center. And in here, I just training.
What are you training here in Australia?
Training about educational. My specialty study business study, economic, computer, and so on.
Thank you very much and happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
Megan Dawes, you work for the Victorian Arts Centre. What is the Victorian Arts Centre?
The Victorian Arts Centre consists of the Melbourne Concert Hall for music, the Theatres building with 3 theatres including an opera house for opera and ballet, and the Victorian College of the Arts for students studying the arts, and the Sydney Myer Music Bowl for outdoor performances.
I think gonna show on.
Superintendent Alec Pillar at Collingwood Education Centre. How many nationalities are there in this class?
There's 6 nationalities in this class, and I think you'll find there are about 26 or 7 nationalities in the school.
Where were these students born?
80% of them were born overseas. Only 20% of them are locally born.
Is this a typical setup of a class in Melbourne?
If you're talking about the inner suburban schools, yes, a lot of refugees have tended to or immigrants, I shouldn't say refugees for all of them, a lot of immigrant groups have tended to come to the cities rather than the country. So if you go to an outer suburb of Melbourne, you wouldn't find a lot of different nationalities, and you certainly wouldn't find that in a country school.
Please introduce yourself.
My name's Rosanna DeMarco and I'm Australian born.
Australian born, and your parents?
My parents migrated from Italy and I was born in Australia as they married in Australia.
Do you speak Italian as well?
I speak a little Italian, probably not enough to get me through education in Italy, but enough for my relatives and things to understand.
My name is Kelly Veselopoulos.
And where were you born?
I was born in Greece,
How old were you when you came to Australia?
about 2 years old.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak 2 languages,
And they are?
Greek and English.
And when do you use English and when do you use Greek?
I speak English when I am with my friends, and I speak English to my sister, but I speak Greek with my family and at Greek school.
And what is Greek school?
Greek school is a place, it's like a school that you go to once a week and you study Greek.
If you want something Greek here in Melbourne, where do you go?
Well, the main place you could go to is Lonsdale Street, which is a Greek street where you can buy anything from souvenirs to wedding clothes that are imported from Greece or made with the Greek sort of touch. It's a meeting place for all Greek people. There are cake shops where people just sit down and eat and talk Greek. That's all you'd hear.
What is Lygon Street?
Basically, Lygon Street is a collection of shops, Italian shops and stores. It's a lot of Italian commodities, and basically that's where young people go if they want to have fun and they're Italian. A lot of other people go there too.
Where would you go if you want a good meal?
Well, I think Australia is unique in that there's a huge range of various cuisines from all different countries, and so if you want a good meal from any cuisine, you could go basically anywhere. Italian is probably Lygon Street or the city. Chinese, obviously Chinatown.
Robert Ho, President of the Chinese Youth Society of Melbourne. How many Chinese are there in Melbourne?
There are 30,000 Chinese in Melbourne. They come from different regions of Asia.
What's happening here now?
We are celebrating the Moon Festival.
And what is the Moon Festival?
The Moon Festival, it goes back many centuries about these stories about this king and queen. The queen stole these pills from the king and she flew to the moon.
When you say English, is that British English, Australian English, or American?
There is English, American, Australian.
So what would you say you speak now? Is that Australian, English, or American?
A bit of all three, I suppose. Or mainly English.
Are you a Dinkum Australian?
Probably not Dinkum. I consider myself Australian, but I have Italian ties, so I couldn't call myself a Dinka Mozzie.
With the discovery of gold came quite a number of groups. Big group of Chinese, for instance.
When was that?
That was in the 1850s with the gold rush. And lots of money was made then. And you can tell if you look at an Australian city, Melbourne especially, you can see very grand public buildings on the European model. And they're often very beautiful. And a few years ago they weren't very much appreciated and a lot of them were pulled down. And now, of course, we're starting to preserve them. It's a city that's suddenly become aware of its history. It was busily destroying it when I was a young man, pulling down things that they're now trying to save.
How many people come to the game?
Well, today we're expecting somewhere in between 85 and 90,000 people and around 40 million people to be watching it around the world. Well, the game of Australian rules football, which to us is called footy, is a mixture between rugby, basketball and soccer with some very different rules to what most people would understand.
You said footy?
Yes, that's an Australian term that we all use.
What do you call it otherwise?
A lot of people would call it Australian rules, and Americans call it aerial ping pong.
very difficult?
Yes, the rules are very difficult for the people who don't understand the game. That you would have marks where the person would take the ball in the hand. That is very easy to understand. The scoring system is very easy to understand, but a lot of the technical rules are very difficult to understand for people who don't understand the game.
How important is this game?
Well, this game today is probably one of the most important sporting events on the Australian sport calendar. The grand final today, as you're watching, would be one of the most important in the whole year.
What is the Royal Agricultural Show?
Well, the Royal Agricultural Show is put on in September each year for the agricultural people of Victoria, and the sheep and cattle and horses and Clydesdale horses. There's a big, as you well know, I suppose you've seen the parade.
How do you train the dog to obey you that well?
Oh, well, you get him when he's a little pup and feed him and talk to him, and then get him on a string and tell him to sit down, and whatever you want him to do. Come behind, or there's no hard and fast rules of, one command for each dog. That's not on. You just get your dog and get him used to your way of talking and your tone of voice. You say sit down, and when he gets to learn to sit down, he'll sit down every time he asks you.
Stop! Get out of that! Get out! Get! Come behind! Come here! Come over!
And how does the dog get used to the sheep?
Oh, well, that's born instinct. It's born in him.
Come over! Come on in! Get up! Come over! Come on, in! Push out! Come on! Walk out! Get in! Stop! Stop there! Here! Stop! Stop! Here!
The great numbers of people live in the two largest capital cities, Melbourne and Sydney, and you have a picture, I suppose, in your mind of a typical Australian, and he's a country person, but statistically, he's not our average. Your average Australian is a city dweller.
It is also a multicultural society, isn't it?
Yes, there's a lot of different nationalities that live here and have businesses here. And there's sort of areas in the city that are all Chinese or all Italian and things like that, so it's very cosmopolitan.
And do you know where your ancestors come from?
Australia, from way back, they're Australian.
So you're a Dinkum Aussie?
Yes, I think so.